Hello everyone and welcome to Real Life Talks. I'm your host Yvonne Heath, author of the book Love Your Life to Death and founder of the I Just Showed Up movement. So joining me in the studio today is Frances Yarbrough. Hello Frances.
Hello Yvonne.
Welcome. I'm so happy that you're here today. So Frances is the Executive Director of North Simcoe Victim Services, and we're going to have a great talk. But first we're going to listen to just a short clip which is on your website.
Resiliency means different things to different people. And it's how you step into the space and take that bold next step when you go through times of adversity and trouble.
Victim services volunteers have the opportunity to help people on what is possibly the worst day of their life.
We provide caring response to those in crisis, supporting victims of crime and tragic circumstance, and facilitating long-term solutions, so empowering resilience.
Resiliency, bouncing back in times of adversity.
Resiliency is finding the courage to recover from and adjust to change.
Well, what is it that we're trying to become resilient to? And in large part, it is to trauma. Historically, we've done a really good job, or at least we've paid a lot of attention to those things that can cause bodily injury, especially for first responders. But more recently, I think we're starting to acknowledge that we have to do a better job of taking care of them psychologically because of the nature of the work that they do and the things that they're exposed to.
Resiliency to me means to be able to work through and overcome all the crises and curves that life throws at you.
Resiliency means successfully overcoming everyday obstacles, big and small.
You know, we can't control what life throws at us. We can't. But we can choose how we will respond to it. Take care of yourself so that you can stay well, to serve well. That's how we become resilient, is to recognize that that part of us is still who we are as humans.
I really love that clip and the fact that resiliency means different things to different people, and there's so many important messages in there. Number one is we can't control what life throws at us, but we can choose how we will respond to it, and that is a really important message, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes, and of course we can't help but talk about the fact that there has been a huge tragedy in Canada just recently in Saskatchewan with Humboldt Broncos and a bus accident that was horrific, and 15 people have died and there are still people fighting for their lives. And so I feel like we're fortunate that we're here because you can share some of your wisdom and how we can help people just wrap their heads around things and what Victim Services provides, and we'll go from there.
Okay, great, thank you. So the Victim Services across Canada have very similar roles, and our job is to assist people that have been impacted by tragic circumstances, such as in Saskatchewan, or by a crime. And so we show up either on scene, people come and see us at our office, or we meet individuals at hospital, at police detachments, and we provide emotional support, but as well as practical assistance. So whatever is needed at that time, and then we assist them over the long term, connecting them with other services and referral within their own community to give them the support that they can then recover and move to the next steps, whatever those are.
And I mean that is so important because in the beginning, you know, obviously in the crisis, in the moment, is you absolutely need professionals and you need everybody to be able to be there, and the volunteers with Victim Services, just so extraordinary, where in circumstances where most people are afraid and run the other way, they're running to help in any way that they can, and I think that is just the most extraordinary gift. But that grief after a crisis goes on and on, doesn't it? It
does, and I think within my own experience working with people who are bereaved, that we often assume people after a loss, they seem to be doing so well.
Right.
And they're not doing well, they're just doing. They're just getting through all the paperwork, all the chores, making the phone calls, you know, going to banks, things like that, doing all that stuff. And then usually around 3 to 5 months, that's when the brain starts to realize that, yes, the environment around me is very different.
Yes.
And there are no more doing things, that now we have to figure out how to adapt to our new environment. And we often see people become isolated and really struggle anywhere between 3 and 18 months because they're adjusting to their new environment, and they often they struggle on how to do that. They have a lot of questions. Many of the folks that were very close to them may have moved away because, you know, it's uncomfortable. They don't know what to say.
Right.
They don't know how to assist because we're all very good at doing, but we're not very good at just being.
Just being,
Yeah.
exactly. And in those first couple of months, of course, you can be you're in shock on automatic pilot, and there are several things you need to do. And that's when most people, your village, are there for you. But then eventually everybody goes back to their regular life, don't they?
Yes.
But your life has changed forever.
Absolutely. And to adjust to that new reality, to the different environment, we talk about the primary loss, which is the loss of the person, the job, the relationship, whatever it is.
Yes.
And then comes the secondary losses, and they can carry on for years, just adapting to all the differences, whether, you know, it's a different job, whether that person that you were really close to has passed away, and all the roles that they fulfilled in the family, you know, now that's gone. So who is going to do those jobs? Who is going to fill that gap? And so often we see not only just that loss of relationship, but we also see then multiple losses within that cohort, that family, that workplace. And so we talk about those secondary losses, and it's like dropping a pebble in a pond, and the ripple effects. And so for folks that have had a significant loss, it can be the organizing principle for several years. And I think that's a piece that people really struggle with, is they talk about their grief and the intensity and the depth of it, and they wonder how they're going to survive, because they wonder, how can something so painful not kill us?
That's right. And as with you know, young people dying, and so many, I mean, 15 lives lost all at once, and the ripple effect of that, and the pain is so acute that you can't even imagine how you can survive. And it's family, but also teachers and students, and it just goes on. And I wonder what are some, as communities, what are the most important things, or how can they best support families, or what are the best, you know, what are some things we can share to help people navigate through their deep grief when maybe they're not, you know, impacted, like they're not the family, but they're grieving and they don't know what to do.
From the work that I've done and working with many people and working with volunteers, there's several things that people can do, and I think we have a tendency to minimize that, and it's really, really important. We can't fix it.
No.
There are no magic words, but we can be present with them. We can be present and help hold that pain for a while, and so it needs somebody that's able to do that, and that's a hard ask for a lot of people. They don't like being comfortable. You have to be comfortable with people's tears.
Yes.
You need to be able to say the individual's name, and that's really important, because one of the things that those that are bereaved fear is that person's going to be forgotten.
Okay.
So if you say the person's name, rather than saying your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad, but say the person's name, then you acknowledge that that person was there and they meant something, and you're acknowledging that the importance of that relationship. And you can always ask, is there something I can do? But people don't know.
They don't know. But I always say to people, the thing is that regular life stuff keeps happening, right? Like, grief doesn't care if you're grieving, or life goes on. So your grass still needs to be cut, and you still need meals, and kids still need to go to activities. And wouldn't it be wonderful to say, I'm here, you know, I'd like to, can I drive the kids to soccer, or I'd love to cut the grass, and I'm sure no one would mind if you shoveled their path. You know, in Muskoka, you could do that in April, May, and June, apparently, because it's never going to stop snowing. But, you know, those things that we have to stop. Oh, it's okay. People don't want to trouble other people either, right? So maybe you could just do something or offer a couple of choices. I'd like to help. And
I think it's important to give tangible, concrete examples.
Yes.
Like if you know the person, you know something about them, you know something about the family, you can, like say, offer about, you know, taking the kids to school, taking them to piano. Try to encourage that regular routine, because when there's nothing else that's regular about life, sometimes those other pieces just really help keep folks grounded.
Okay.
And I think just keeping connected, just like you mentioned before about just keeping connected on a regular basis, you know, and if the person doesn't want to talk, then that's fine, you know, but just let them know that, you know, you're still here, you're not going anywhere, and invite them out. If, you know, you're going somewhere, just extend that invitation. Right. They may say no, but then also give them permission. If you change your mind at the last minute, that's okay.
Right, but give them the opportunity. And a lot of people say to me, oh, I don't know if I should call. Call.
Yes.
Hug, email, text, because those things make a difference. And, you know, again, there'll be many people around that people are compassionate and they care. But when they're fearful and they're uncomfortable, they stay away. And so to me, the greatest thing you can do is just show up in whatever capacity you can and acknowledge and allow all feelings, right?
Absolutely.
We're human, it's messy, and we just need to be okay with being uncomfortable. It's funny, many times in nursing, people thought, oh, Yvonne's good at this stuff. And if I went into a room and, you know, it was a crisis and everyone's crying, I just grabbed the Kleenex and started crying and hugging everybody. It was being good at it. It's not about that at all, is it?
Yeah. It's giving individuals permission to feel at whatever depth they need to. And I think as well to be mindful of, you know, for example, the families that have been impacted by the Broncos deaths, that, you know, being aware of anniversary dates and birthdays and how tough Christmas is going to be. And so those parents will be certainly grieving the past, grieving the present, and grieving the future.
Absolutely.
So a lot of their grief will be around the potential of what those young men could have been.
Absolutely.
Right? Not only as what they were at this point, but into the future.
Yes.
Yeah. As well as the survivors.
Oh, right? And the survivor guilt is another, you know, that's just such a hard one, and they certainly need compassion and to be acknowledged, and you know, it's never a choice. I mean, of course, no one would ever have chosen any of this, but the other big piece, and we talked about this, is that when our lives get really busy and we think, oh, I'm sure, you know, they're doing okay, or they seem to have a lot of people, but I think it's really important to put it in your phone, call every Monday, or, you know, have a group of friends, have your community, because you still need your village, have people around. Maybe you're going to check in on Monday, you're going to check in on Tuesday for the next year, or however long, right? Because this is not... Somebody asked me actually once, you know, how long, I should be done grieving now, right? It's been, you know, several months. And I just said, I'm so sorry to be the bearer of bad news. It doesn't work that way, does it?
No, it's not a timed event. There's no medals for getting through it quickly.
No, there isn't.
And we find that people often talk about closure or the phases, and from working with folks, what they tell me is that there's no closure.
No.
That they always have that grief in their heart. It diminishes over time, but it's always still there. Particular days will bring it on, particular triggers, and that they may not necessarily accept the loss, but they get to the point where they can acknowledge it and carry it with them and be okay.
Yes. And I think another important piece is that it's okay if somebody starts to talk about it, just listen, right, at any time. And, you know, I remember one friend who became a grief counselor, and she said, I get to talk about my son over and over, you know, and what I went through, and he died when he was 22, and I get to talk about my son, and I love that. And to keep someone's memories and legacy alive, and they're always a part of your life. They're not physically still present, but you're, you know, again, I didn't realize that piece of people worry, are we going to forget about this person? So, you know, that we don't need to do that. That isn't, people think if you stop talking about the person, then you're over it and you're in a better place, and that's not it, is it?
Or they're afraid that I'm going to upset them.
Right.
You
They're
know?
already upset.
That's right, yeah. So I know that people that have lost significant individuals in their lives, that leading up to Father's Day, Mother's Day, Christmas, birthday, anniversaries, I mean, that's what they're thinking about. And so to pick up the phone or to write a note or to just go out for a coffee and say, you know, and just acknowledge the day that's coming up, and the individual may or may not be struggling. But if they are, then you've just given that permission to that person to talk about it. And even just asking some questions like, so what was the favorite birthday meal? Or, you know, what was the best gift that that individual ever gave you? And I find that often talking about the gifts, not so much that you gave them, but that they gave you. And it may not be, you know, a physical gift, but it might be, you know, I learned how to laugh. I learned how to be more caring. I learned, you know, just some particular piece of knowledge or something. And so those are the really important gifts that we take forward with us, and that helps our grief diminish, and it becomes part of us. It changes us, but we take those pieces into our hearts and our minds, and so it's not so much really focusing on the physical being, that physical part, that person was actually there, but we get to the point where we can carry that person with us in our minds and in our hearts and within our spirit. And that, I think, brings about some comfort, maybe even some post-traumatic growth, like from this horrendous experience, such as a bus crash or sudden death or, you know, breakup of relationship or whatever it is. It's like, what have I learned? How am I a better person because of that situation? Working with individuals who've had very difficult relationships with individuals, and that individual has passed away, you know, even talking about the gifts is, well, what I learned from that relationship was not to treat people like the way that person taught me.
Exactly. So you still learn something.
You still learn something, and it's still a gift. Right?
Yes, that's right.
And I think we often we don't pay enough attention to those pieces or embrace those pieces. We focus more on tangible things, on achievements, and I think it's the small little gifts that really help us in our grief journey.
Absolutely. So talk a little bit more about post-traumatic growth. What does that mean, and what's possible with that?
So that's comes out of some research that actually some professors at the Wilfrid Laurier have done with parents whose children have died of illness. So basically they were a caregiver for a long time and the child died. And what the parents reported on was that people focus very much on the loss. And after a certain period of time and the parents working through their grief, they want to talk about what's been positive, because there is positive. And they talk about, we were able to learn this. You know, our relationship was closer. The way we treated the other children was different. The way we keep connected with our family is now more genuine. So they've taken that terrible experience or that difficult experience and, I say, took the gifts out of it, took the learnings and the gifts, and that's what they choose to move forward on, rather than dwelling on you know, the days leading up to the death or the death. And from working with folks, that's what I found, that I knew they'd sort of turn the corner on their grief journey is when they looked at the positive memories, at the gifts, at the things that they had learned, rather on either, you know, if it's a sudden death that day, or if it's an illness is leading up to the death and what happened to the death, because initially that's the focus, right? That's your brain's trying to figure out what happened. And then when you're able to sort of come up for air and look around and see, oh, there was good parts to it.
There always, and there always is, and in that acute grief, it's almost impossible to see, and you just have to allow your grief, and your heart is too broken to see that. But I remember reading once in Chicken Soup for the Soul, which I bawled for, I think, an hour after I read it, this little boy his brother had died, and he was 3 years old. And this little boy was saying to his mom, "Aren't we so lucky, Mom?" And of course the mother's thinking, how can we possibly, be lucky? And he said, some people didn't even get to meet. His name was Tanner, which is my little boy's name, so I think that contributed to my tears. But I said, some people didn't even get to meet Tanner, and we had him in our lives for 3 years.
Yes.
I think, oh my goodness, to be able to come to that place, what... Easier said than done? Absolutely. Yeah. All of this isn't it?
Absolutely.
But it's possible.
Right. And I think if, as you say, to be present and to show up, that gives people hope that they're not going to be left alone, that even in their darkest times with such horrendous pain, that there's still people around them that still love them and support them, and that will be there for them. They can't take the pain away, but they're willing to be with you in your pain.
I think that's a really important piece, because people who are grieving can be angry, and maybe they're bitter, and maybe they're going to take things out on you. And I actually had one friend saying, geez, thanks for sticking around, because I know I haven't been really good company. And I said, you really haven't. Let's be honest. But you know what? I'm here for you. Because showing up and sitting in the mud with someone, yes, it's uncomfortable. And are they pleasant? Maybe not. But that's real life, isn't it? Being able to show up in the good times and the bad. And anger is a very big part of grieving, isn't it? And, just we don't recognize that sometimes.
Well, we can refer to anger as a second emotion, because it's like an iceberg, and what we see is the anger, but underneath there's the hopelessness, the helplessness, the fear. I mean, we often get angry out because we don't know what to do with the fear and the hopelessness and the helplessness. So we cope by getting angry, right? We need some sort of control, and so our control is to become angry. And we talk about people that not necessarily being angry at a particular thing, just angry at the world, right? Because they're fearful of, what do I do now? I don't know how to do this. I can't feel this bad and survive. And so I think just being willing to be with the tears, with the anger, and just allow whatever comes to be, not to judge, not to criticize people as they should, grieve a certain way. And that's classic in families, is that, our grief is a natural reaction to a perception of a loss. So natural being is that we can't control it. It's individual, and it's going to be what it is. And the perception is, my relationship to a person can be very different than another person in the family, right? So if it's a parent that dies, my siblings and I may have very different relationships with the parent. So the way I grieve is going to be very different, and the way I honor my grief may be very different.
So important.
And many families struggle because, or families and friends, because some people need to honor their grief by putting it, say, out on social media, and others want it to be very, very private, right? So even that can create conflict and tension, is because we aren't accepting of the way other people grieve.
That's right, and that is a really huge, important point, because there are things that will make you feel better that is totally different than somebody else, and the way you express your grief is totally different. I would say to my husband, Jordy has a very caring heart. Yes, you do, honey. He's a very caring, wonderful person, but I think I could count, I've seen him cry maybe 5 times in 16 years. And if you don't understand that people grieve differently, and you ask him how many times he's seen me cry, he says, well, which week are you talking about?
Are you talking about today?
You mean today? Yes, because I do not apologize when my heart is broken. I cry and I cry and I cry, and that's just who I am. And we all, different things will make us feel better, and different things will help you through the grieving process, and that's, you know, and that's okay. So you've given us some very important things to think about, and I would love to sort of end with a feel-good story. Do you have any wonderful stories about victim services here in Orillia, or people we've helped
Yeah, well, there's so many. We often get, you know, notes from clients who we've helped, and they, you know, talk about, you know, these people showed up in the middle of the night.
Yes.
I didn't know who they were, but they showed up with such kindness to help me.
Yes.
I had no idea that there were people in the community that would do that, and they got me to a safe place, and they helped me rebuild my life.
Now, how wonderful is that? And talk about rewarding. And I think that's, like I've said, victim services volunteers to me are those heroes, because not only do they show up in what could be someone's worst day of their entire lives, like they're there in sometimes horrific situations, aren't they?
Absolutely.
And they're volunteering. They're not even getting paid.
They do it for the love of people and the love of their community, and
it's extraordinary.
They're amazingly compassion, caring individuals, and we're fortunate that we have over 70 of them in this community.
70. Wow, that is so incredible. And they're on call 24 hours a day, or you have people on call 24 hours a day, right?
Yes.
And victim services, it's free. People can call if they're in crisis. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So we are a free service. We're a registered charity. So we're community-based. We provide assistance in the city of Orillia, Township of Severn, Township of Wimmera, and Rama First Nations. We're often called by first responders, but as well individuals can contact us if they've been impacted by tragic circumstance or a crime. Yeah.
Okay, so registered charity, did you catch that? Because as a registered charity, donations are always welcome, right?
Absolutely.
Because that's how things are funded and keep on going. So, Frances, I cannot thank you enough for everything that you do. Every volunteer out there, thank you for what you do. It's extraordinary, and we certainly send love to everyone impacted by the tragedy at Humboldt Broncos, and we just send them all love. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So thanks for joining us today. Real Life Talks is about just showing up for yourself and others, and sometimes having hard conversations. So if you want to be able to just show up, if you want to be empowered and resilient, my call to action is plan your life, plan your death, and then just love your life to death. And always bring your own tambourine to the party. Thanks. See you next time.